All right, so we've painted our sky. I rinsed out my brush. I'm just gonna kind of wipe it along there. Grab a napkin and just kind of dry it out a little bit so it's not sopping wet. My mountains, I want to make a light gray. If you want to add a little bit of brown, you're welcome to. If you're gonna do brown, you'll need to mix it on with your primary colors. If you mix all three of those together, you should end up with some kind of brown. But we want to keep it light. So just like we did the sky with white first, we're going to do our mountains with the white first as well. Just all over the whole mountains, a base coat of white. This will keep the color faded and keep us from going too dark so that it doesn't come forward too much. Remember, the things that are farther away are lighter colors. They're a little bit more blue-gray as well. Atmospheric perspective is what that's called. All right, so I have my white down. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of my black, just a little. Black is very strong. It will definitely take things over if you let it. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of that gray. I'm also gonna think about the direction of my mountain. So I'm actually gonna go from the tips down a little bit. If you wanna leave some white on there for a snow cap, you're welcome to. But kind of angle it down, and that will help that flow of the mountain look more realistic. There we go. So two of my mountains have some white caps. You can also think about a little bit of shadowing. So if my light is coming from this direction, I can add some shadows on that opposite side. You gotta do with this all working quickly. You can see how fast I'm going. If you take too long, it's all gonna dry up. You don't want it to dry. You wanna do this while it's wet, so we get that kind of Bob Ross effect. There we go. Now we've got some little mountains in our background, some happy little mountains according to Bob Ross. We'll get to our trees, our happy trees, a little bit later. All right, now I'm done with my background. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my brush. I'm just going to wipe it onto a napkin, keep it clean. I'm still gonna use this larger brush for my middle ground, at least starting off. So now I need to mix colors. So here I have a brush. I'm gonna use the back of my brush to mix the colors. So this will become my palette knife. I'm gonna mix my yellow, plenty of yellow. I'm gonna make green. So if you've ever made a color wheel before, you know that if you mix yellow together with another primary color, the blue, you will get green. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of blue because yellow is very, very light. It's gonna be very, very weak compared to the blue. So just a lot of yellow, just a little bit of blue, and you can already see that is enough to make a very lovely green. So this beautiful green is very bright. Too bright for things that are too very far away from us. So the things in my background, in my middle ground, this is too bright for that. So there are some solutions to that. We can add some white to it. We can also neutralize it a little bit. So what does it mean to neutralize something? I'm going to use the opposite color. So the opposite color of green is red. So I'm just going to grab a little bit. You can see it's just a little bit. And I'm just going to mix that together. It makes it more neutral, so it's not as bright of a green, which is what I want. I don't want it to be so bright. I want it to fade into the background. I still think it could be a little bit more blue as well because we talked about atmospheric perspective. It can be a little bit blue. So I'm gonna add a little bit more blue in there. There we go, that's the color I like. I really like that color for my middle ground. So it's been neutralized with a little bit of red, has a little bit more blue in it so that it's a little bit more that kind of atmospheric perspective effect. Okay, so I've cleaned off my back of my brush. You can kind of rinse it if you want to in a little bit of water, but you should just only pretty much use a napkin to clean that off. Just a tiny bit of water if you need. Okay, so I'm gonna take my brush. Now I have to consider two different greens because I have my grass as well as my trees. So I'm going to start off with my trees. I'm just going to take this green and add it into my tree space. I want the top of the tree line to be very natural, so I'm just kind of rubbing it in. Just kind of rubbing it in. This is still very bright. I think I need to add some more white to it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and grab some white and just let it mix on the page. But when you do it like this, you have to make sure that you mix the colors well. You don't want it to be too blotchy, especially far away. It's already going to be one kind of, your eye will blend it all together. So you don't want it to be too highly textured when it's far away. Some texture is good. I'm not saying that it's bad. Just not a ton. There we go. Looking great. Take a little bit of that green, add a little bit more texture in there. Just kind of splotchy. I want it to be in the lower part of my forested area because that's too high. Because it's closer to us. Remember, things lower are closer. So I'm adding a little bit of blotchiness in the lower area, letting that get a little bit darker down here to give that effect of depth. All right, so there's my tree line. I'm going to mix, oh, I just put my finger in the white. I'm going to mix a new color here to create my grass color. So again, taking my palette, or my paintbrush, not palette knife. I'm using it as a palette knife. I'm gonna add more yellow to that and just mix it up. So I think for my yellow, for my grass, I'm gonna go more yellow. For my trees, I'll go a little bit more blue. That way I can tell the difference in between the two different values. So it's not all the same green. A little bit more yellow. So if I want to get more yellow, I have to clean off my brush so I don't put that green into my yellow. You want to try to keep them as clean as possible. I got a little bit of green in there, but it's not a lot, so it'll be okay. All right, so there we are with more yellow in there. So I'm going to use that for my grass. I'm also going to be adding white to this again so it fades away into the background. You want it to be far away. All right, gonna load up my brush a little bit, again with my large brush still. And, oh yeah, that's a really nice color. Gonna add a little bit of white. Fade that away. Let that be a part of the base of the mountains. It's a little bit faint. I'm gonna add a little bit more green in there. Could be a little stronger. Ooh, that's real bright. Fade that back a little bit. All right, so I'm just gonna paint this in here really quick. I'm gonna go a little bit brighter as it gets lower, keeping in mind closer is lower on the page. Now it's always good to go a little bit over your intended lines. So I know I'm going to have a lake in this area, but I want to go over it a little bit. That is because acrylic paint covers itself really well. So it's better to go a little bit more, especially with your background colors. It's better to cover more than to have gaps that you're going to try to color match and fix later. So I'm going to go over my lines a little bit. This is brighter as it's lower, so it's a little bit more intense down here, which is intended. I'm not going to mix as much white in here, if any. Get a good amount of coverage. You really want to cover this canvas. You can feel the texture of the canvas. which is fantastic. But if you don't add enough paint, you can really see the texture. And that can be a little bit unwanted, just depending on what you want. I'm gonna fade that up. So I'm working really quick because again, this paint dries very quickly. I'm gonna cover up most of where I'm gonna put my stream later. You can see I'm painting side to side horizontally. You wanna apply your paint side to side because if you're looking at things from the side like we are, in a landscape, the lines of your vision will be horizontal. All right, so now I have my middle ground ready almost, except for the lake. So I'm gonna do that super quick. I'm gonna switch brushes for that. So I've done a lot with my large brush. I'm just gonna make sure that I really rinse that out really well. So it's pretty well. I'm wiping it. There's almost nothing there. I can test it against my arm. There's almost nothing there. We still want to wash this out with soap later, but we can stop there for now. I'm going to switch to my medium-sized brush, and I'm going to apply white. Just like the sky, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm also going to paint over that tree that I'm going to do in my foreground later. That's okay. We can always go back and paint over this. I'm going to add some blue for my water. Again, going side to side, really important. Especially for water. Water is flat on the top, so if you go vertical or diagonal, it's gonna look strange. I'm gonna try to get all of those white spots covered. All right. A little bit of texture is fine, just like that, that's good. If you wanna even add some sparklies in there, you can take some white and just go side to side like this. Covered that a little bit too much. Get some nice longer streaks. There we go. So you can add those in there if you want. Okay, now I'm gonna rinse out my brush and we're gonna move into the foreground next. You can let this completely dry if you'd like to. We're gonna move into the foreground in the next video.